morning, everyone. Thanks for starting May. Can you believe it already? Here we have the sun shining, but I don't think we have the same weather across the pond. As we start May with CFI and Connect the Dots with Dr. Hughes, I'm Mickey French. I am the Executive Director of the Center for Food Integrity, so happy to have you joining us. Today we have with us, as always, Dr. Food, David Hughes. He has decades of experience in the food system and is great at sharing insights on what's happening across the pond and around the world. So I appreciate David taking the time before you start your travels again.
Right, and delighted to be. It's hello from a very, very soggy Wales, Mickey. Our weather has been just appalling for the last 6 months. It's the wettest on record since we started to measure rainfall, and that was back in 1836, for goodness sake. Yes, I've got a big 2 weeks. Next week I'm in Holland, just in time to catch the tulips, actually, which are a bit late this year. But then I'm off to Australia.
Fantastic. I'd love to see that sometime. So again, we're happy to be live this morning. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. So let's jump in. So today's topics, we're really talking about things that consumers hold dear. And my favorite things are children, favorite foods, and their wine. So let's start what's happening over there and that pinch point of parents wanting healthy food, but also faced with the high childcare costs. Tell us about this tension and where it's working and not working.
Right. It's healthy food and childcare. It's big issues here, and parents, as you say, are pinched. They're making tough choices. But in the UK, parents are overwhelmingly supportive of government taxes, believe it or not, on unhealthy foods, particularly the high-fat, sugar, salt type foods. And why? Because they know that they have, and it creates a problem. So, for example, if we just go back to the pandemic, obesity went from 10 to 14% in children aged 4 to 5 years during the pandemic. And it's not getting any better. I know it's a big issue for you guys too. So there was a study just released now, and it found that 75% of those who were interviewed want new taxes. They want bans on certain unhealthy items, and they want restrictions on promoting the HFSS foods. Yet there are issues here. The challenge is that healthier foods for kids is costly on a cents per calorie basis, compared particularly with sweeties and processed cheese and the likes of pop desserts, and which again on a cents per calorie basis are much less expensive than fruit and veg. And also the parents asked here didn't like the fact that their kids were barraged with marketing for unhealthy stuff. And perhaps most difficult of all, of course, trying to change habits is that kids want the sweet stuff, for goodness sake. It's addictive. Half of the parents say the government must do something about it. And I bet you wouldn't get that in the US, but that's by
Not at all.
No. And I wonder, Mickey, is there a connection between food affordability, childcare costs, and happiness? Well, what's that about? Listen to this. So there's a UN agency in cooperation with the Oxford Wellbeing Research Centre in the UK. They've released their 2024 World Happiness Report. Goodness me, they do it every year, actually. And you might ask, well, how do you measure happiness? Well, on certain criteria, such as, for example, income of household, social or government support for the household, life expectancy, trust in national institutions, and degree of corruption in any particular country. So who do you think is going to be top of the happiness league? I mean, I bet many of you would guess, actually. Top of the group, it's those Scandos. Finland, Denmark, Iceland, and Sweden, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Where are we? Well, the UK comes in number 20 in the league, and you guys come in at number 23. Down the bottom is poor Afghanistan, who are ranked 143. So what's the link with childcare and childcare costs? Well, those at the top of the happiness index have strong government support. I mean, for example, families with children in Sweden and Denmark receive up to $15,000 per year from government for childcare for their families. Compared with, I think you guys, if you're lucky, get 1,000 in the US, and we get a measly $600. And so for many right now, it's tough, to work out, can I afford to buy healthy food? And what about paying for childcare? I've got to take these choices. And in fact, in the UK, people are saying, look, I can't increase my work hours to earn more money to buy better food because I can't afford the childcare, or indeed, I can't even get the childcare if I have the money. It's an issue.
Yeah, it's an issue here too. We share that challenge because it's easier to make the cheaper convenience foods,
Yeah.
and it's easier, it's cheaper, and yeah, we all have to work. So
Yes.
um, so that leads us to the second topic of things we care about, like our favorite foods. This is very important to me. Fish and chips. Spent a lot of time in Ireland. So what's happening to the cost of our favorite dish in the UK and in Ireland, and how are the global issues of impacting this delicious food served at the local pubs?
Well, yeah, yes. Oh my. It might be a bit dramatic to call it a existential British soul food crisis, but we are the home of fried fish and chips. It's been feeding the urban working class since the 1860s. And what are the issues? Well, first of all, prices are soaring for fish and potatoes, which essentially the two major ingredients. And cod supplies, we tend to use the species cod. Cod supplies are 40% down. First of all, due to dynamics like severe tariffs that our government have put on Russian cod, the principal source of cod for us, due to the Ukrainian war. Plus, actually, and more fundamentally, globally and locally, stocks are collapsing due to overfishing. Onto the potatoes, what's happened there? Well, potato prices are up 50% in price due to appalling weather. As mentioned earlier, the wettest winter since record keeping began. And then, of course, we've got high energy costs relative to you and increased labor costs due to Brexit. Actually, my son Garth owns a traditional pub and a traditional fish and chip shop in Devon. He's very price competitive, but I was there at the weekend and he charges $14 for a single portion of takeaway fish and chips. Well, okay. Well, if you're a family of two adults and say two children, it costs you $50 to pop in for your little favorite meal. It's a stretch for working class folk. And look, also, Brits are very conservative on fish. There are cheaper fishes around, fish species, but we're unwilling to change. You're pretty good at pollock, for example, eating pollock. Well, if you say pollock in the UK, people think you're just being vulgar, for goodness sake. And so how does Garth handle this? He can shrink the portions, so shrinkflation on his fish and chips, but that makes people very grumpy. But he also, unfortunately, has to say, well, perhaps the children might prefer chicken, that's cheaper. But so that's fish and chips, but there's also glum news somewhere else. There's dropping demand for cider. And, we wash our fish and chips down with cider, for goodness sake. The UK and Ireland lead the world, I don't know whether we're proud of this, in hard cider drinking. And the biggest brand is Bulmers, which is owned by Heineken. And Heineken sales for cider are down 30% in 10 years. And so, what's the implication of that? Well, in Wales, where I am, just by me, actually, Heineken have just pulled out 350 acres of apple trees and they're selling the land. Why? Because they're not making enough profit on cider. Their costs are up and prices can't keep up. And so they've chopped the trees down. And the fact of the matter is it takes 8 years to plant cider apple, to plant and harvest cider apples. And so once the trees are down, that's it. But Mickey, if you'll indulge me, I just want to add a third, because bad things, as we used to say, sometimes come in threes. When we go to the seaside to have our fish and chips and drink our cider, the kids clamour for rock, as we call it. I think you'd call it rock candy. and essentially it's a stick of boiled sugar. But it's a tradition here, and the rock candy has the name of the seaside town running through its middle. I don't know if you do the same as we do on that. So you get rock candy from Blackpool, Bournemouth, and other great seaside resorts. Well, rock candy makers are going out of business hand over fist. Why? Because there's been a flood of imports from rock candy from China, and it's flooding our market. And so what do we, the rock candy guys in the UK are applying for UK geographical indication status for their rock. What's that mean? When, like Parmigiano Reggiano cheese, or in the USA, for example, I think Florida oranges has geographical indication, and so does Idaho potatoes. So I wish them well. It would be a great shame to lose them. As I say, rock candy with Blackpool through the middle, it's part of our history and heritage.
Right. How fun. How fun. And we in this house are quite fond of Bulmers, so much so that I brought props this morning. In the US, it's called Magners. We have a different brand, but it is definitely Bulmers, same label, same everything. So I pulled that out of the fridge. I have not had that for breakfast, though, I will say, because my preference is what we're going to talk about next, which is wine. And we are talking about sustainable packaging for wine, and this is a new one for me. So tell us a little bit about what Aldi's been up to on wine bottles.
Right. Okay. This actually goes back to middle of March, when March 18, it was Global Recycle Day. I don't know if you celebrated that in the US, but Aldi, the hard discounter, which you got and is a big deal in the UK too, they launched a paper wine bottle for several types of their wine. And in fact, I bought some. I bought their Shiraz and Sauvignon Blanc, and it gets my thumbs up. And the wine bottle is 95% recycled paperboard. So what? Well, it's 5 times lighter than glass bottles. It's 6 times less carbon footprint. I reminded myself, you think, well, surely you can recycle glass, but actually, yes, you can, but it's very expensive on energy to do so. Is there any downside about a paper bottle? Well, actually, it made me, I smile, because it says you have to drink it within 18 months. And I thought, well, not a problem in my household. If I buy a bottle of wine, it goes pretty quickly. If it's in the fridge, it won't be there for more than 2 days. The advantages are, disadvantages are that there is higher cost. Paper is twice the cost of plastic, and sometimes recycled stuff is difficult to source. Also, you need consumer acceptance. People sort of stand back and say, what, paper bottles? Remember, we like traditional packaging. So, for example, when the supermarkets tried to shrink wrap ground beef, consumers didn't like the look of it, even though they knew that they were using half the plastic in doing so. And sometimes, too, for changing packaging, it requires a regulation change. But, we are moving forward, that Nestle are very slowly moving towards paper packaging for their confectionery bars like Kit Kats. PepsiCo, which is looking at paper-based chip packaging, yet it's taking them 3 years to prove that they can maintain the quality and safety of the product in paper. But look, every little bit helps.
Absolutely, absolutely, it does. We have no questions at all in the chat this morning. So let's end with that final tidbit of a update for us from what's happening with tobacco legislation that has now passed, that we discussed a couple weeks ago.
Okay, right. And as we said previously, King Charles's work to eliminate smoking, we were pleased to see. And our Parliament just has approved new legislation. It was passed with a huge majority, supported by all parties of all description, that legislates, wait for this, nobody born after 2009 in the UK will ever be able to legally buy cigarettes in their lifetime. So that generation will be forbidden by law. So, because those born after 2008 can't buy until before the legislation, couldn't buy until they were 18, but now they just won't be able to legally. And Of course, some might think this is controversial, but actually, the young people in that 11 to 17-year-old range are ahead of the game already. In the UK, very few, like 1%, say that they have ever smoked or ever would wish to smoke. Mind you, they might vape. Why are they so down on smoking, young people? Because of the cost, I think. I mean, you guys pay, what, $10 for a pack of 20 cigarettes? In the UK, it's $20 for a pack of cigarettes. And the end of next week, when I go to Australia, wait for this, Australians pay $34 for a pack of 20. That's heavy duty, and you've got to really want that nicotine or tobacco. There we go. So now it's good to see.
Yes, absolutely. Completely agree. So that's all the time we have, and with no questions, we'll bring it to an end. Again, thanks for joining us as we connect the dots with David Hughes, Dr. Food. Hope you'll join us again on June 6th for our next webcast. So please continue to take a look at all of our programs and emerging trends and issues on foodintegrity.com. And we'll see you next month. Enjoy the beautiful month of May, and I hope you get some sunshine down under, if not up in Wales, David.
Thank you. Lovely to talk to you all, and cheerio now. Bye now.
Thanks. Bye-bye.